I'm Morgan Matthews, 35, and I just watched my entire family betray me in our parents' living room. Morgan, your sister Jessica gets your luxury SUV. She has kids, my father announced, smiling proudly. Everyone nodded in agreement, including my husband Brian. I forced a smile while my heart shattered. That Mercedes GLS wasn't just a car, it was a promise my father made to me years ago. As they celebrated with champagne, I quietly made a vow they couldn't hear. They had no idea what they'd just started. Before I dive into this nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever had family break a promise. And let's get into how I finally stood up for myself. My relationship with my father, Robert Matthews, had always been special. From the time I was little, we bonded over cars. While other dads took their kids fishing or to baseball games, my father would take me to car shows. I still remember sitting on his shoulders at age 7, pointing excitedly at the shiny vehicles and memorizing makes and models. When I turned 16, he made me a promise that I've held close for nearly 20 years. "When I retire, Morgan, the Mercedes will be yours," he had said, his hand on my shoulder as we stood in the driveway admiring his brand new Mercedes GLS. "I know how much you love this car. You've earned it with your hard work." He had just promoted me to junior marketing manager at Matthews Financial Consulting, the family business I had been helping with since high school. That car wasn't just any luxury SUV. It was midnight blue with custom leather interior that I had helped my father select. Over the years, I had accompanied him for every service appointment, helped research upgrades, and even picked out the personalized license plate as a birthday gift to him. The car represented our bond, and now that bond was broken. The irony was that I had been the one who sacrificed for the family business. While my younger sister Jessica pursued her photography hobby and then settled down to have 3 kids with her husband Tyler, I had been putting in 60-hour weeks helping to expand Matthews Financial from a local firm to a regional powerhouse. My marketing strategies had doubled our client base in 5 years. Yet here I was, watching my contributions evaporate in an afternoon. "Jessica and Tyler need the space for the kids," my father continued, patting my sister's shoulder as she beamed victoriously. "You and Brian don't have children to transport." That statement hit like a slap. My father knew very well that Brian and I had been trying for a baby for 3 years without success. Fertility treatments had been emotionally and financially draining, but my family rarely acknowledged our struggle. In their eyes, not having children was the same as not wanting them. The rest of my father's retirement announcement didn't improve matters. Jessica was getting the family vacation cabin in Colorado, another property I had fond memories of and had helped renovate. My brother-in-law Tyler was being promoted to chief marketing officer, my current position. And me? I was getting grandmother's antique jewelry collection, which, while sentimental, was hardly equal value to what my sister was receiving. After the announcements, when everyone broke into smaller conversation groups with drinks, I approached my father privately. "Dad, we need to talk about the Mercedes," I said quietly, trying to keep my composure. "You promised it to me." We talked about it for years. My father's face hardened in a way I hadn't seen directed at me before. "Morgan, you need to think about what's best for the family. Your sister needs it more than you do. You and Brian make good money, you can afford your own car." "This isn't about affording a car," I countered, my voice trembling slightly. "It's about keeping your word. That car has meaning to me, to us." He sighed heavily, looking at me as though I were a disappointing client rather than his daughter. "I expected more maturity from you. Jessica has 3 children and family responsibilities. What do you need a 7-seater for? To drive to the spa?" His dismissive tone cut deep. This wasn't just about the car anymore. It was my first clear glimpse of how my father truly saw me, despite all my work and loyalty. In that moment, I realized the first betrayal wasn't just him breaking his explicit promise, it was discovering that my father's love and appreciation had conditions I hadn't known about. I looked across the room at Jessica, who caught my eye and gave me a small, triumphant smile before turning back to show our mother photos of the kids on her phone. The message was clear. In this family, producing grandchildren trumped all other contributions. The week following my father's announcement was a series of futile attempts to reason with my family members. Each conversation revealed deeper layers of betrayal, showing me just how united they were against me. I started with Jessica, hoping that sister-to-sister honesty might penetrate the entitlement. I invited her for coffee at a neutral location, a small cafe downtown, where we used to meet before her children consumed her entire identity. She arrived late, checking her phone every few minutes while I tried to have a serious conversation. "Jessica, you know Dad promised me that car years ago." I began after we'd exchanged minimal pleasantries. "It means a lot to me." "Oh, Morgan, it's just a car," she said with an exaggerated eye roll. "You don't have kids. What do you need it for? To haul your designer shoes around town?" The condescension in her voice made my skin prickle. "That's not the point. Dad made me a promise." "Well, promises change when circumstances change." Jessica set her phone down momentarily to fix me with a pointed stare. "Brian told me you two have stopped the fertility treatments. So it's not like you'll need the space anytime soon." The casual mention of my private medical decisions, information I'd only shared with my husband, felt like a violation. "You've been discussing my fertility issues with Brian? He's worried about you, Morgan." "We all are. You're so focused on work and material things." Her sanctimonious tone made it clear she considered herself morally superior. "Dad always said you were selfish, but I defended you. Now I'm not so sure." That's when the truth came out. Jessica had been lobbying for the car for months before the announcement. She had taken our father to lunch repeatedly, brought the grandchildren for strategic visits, and slowly convinced him that she needed the Mercedes more than I did. She hadn't just accepted my car, she had actively worked to take it from me. My next stop was my mother's house, hoping she might be more reasonable. Diane Matthews had always been the family peacekeeper, but her version of peace typically meant others sacrificing to avoid conflict. "Mom, did you know about Dad's decision before the announcement?" I asked as we sat in her immaculate kitchen. She busied herself with the tea kettle, avoiding my eyes. "Morgan, your father makes his own decisions about his possessions. But you knew he promised that car to me years ago. Did you remind him of that?" She finally turned to face me, her expression unnervingly cold. "You need to grow up and support your sister. Jessica has 3 children to think about. Your father and I are getting older, and those grandchildren are the future of this family." The implication was clear. I wasn't contributing to the family legacy because I hadn't produced children. "So my work, my support of the business, means nothing?" "Of course it matters," she said dismissively. "But family comes first. You've always been career-focused, even as a girl. We hoped you'd outgrow it." This revelation stunned me. My mother had never supported my career choices. All those years of believing she was proud of my accomplishments had been a delusion. She had been waiting for me to outgrow my ambition. The most painful betrayal came from Brian, my husband of 7 years. I discovered text messages on his phone where he had been agreeing with my family behind my back. In a thread with Jessica, he had written, "I know, it's ridiculous how upset she is about a car. I'll try to talk sense into her." When confronted, Brian's defense was pathetic. "I just want to keep the peace, Morgan. It's just a car. Your relationship with your family is more important." "It's not just about the car anymore, Brian. It's about respect and keeping promises. Why are you undermining me to my sister?" "You're overreacting," he said, his tone condescending. "This obsession isn't healthy. Jessica has 3 kids. They need the space. And what about what I need? What about a husband who supports me instead of conspiring with my family?" Our argument escalated until Brian stormed off to the guest bedroom, claiming he needed space from the drama. The irony wasn't lost on me. Suddenly he understood the concept of needing space, just not when it applied to me. The final straw was a family dinner later that week, ostensibly to celebrate my father's retirement. In reality, it became a coordinated attack on my character. As we sat around my parents' dining table, each family member took turns subtly criticizing me. "Morgan, you've always been so materialistic," my mother said with a sad smile. "Even as a child, you wanted the nicest toys. Remember when she wouldn't share her bike with me?" Jessica chimed in, as though an incident from 25 years ago was relevant. "Your focus on possessions worries me," my father added solemnly. "A car is just metal and rubber. Family is what matters." Each comment built upon the last until I realized they had transformed me into the villain, the selfish daughter obsessed with material things, rather than the betrayed daughter standing up for herself. When Brian added, "I've been trying to help her see reason," I couldn't take any more. I stood up, napkin falling to the floor. "I see exactly what's happening here," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage and hurt boiling inside me. "You've all decided I'm the problem because I expect people to keep their word. None of you respect me or the contributions I've made to this family." I left the dinner early, ignoring their calls to come back and stop being dramatic. As I drove home alone in my own car, not the promised Mercedes, I realized I was completely alone in this fight. My entire family had united against me, gaslighting me into believing that expecting people to honor their commitments was somehow unreasonable. That night, I made a decision. If they wanted to treat me like an outsider, I would stop trying to be an insider. It was time to discover what Morgan Matthews could do when she wasn't trying to please the Matthews family. With my eyes now open to my family's betrayal, I decided to investigate just how deep the deception went. As Chief Marketing Officer at Matthews Financial Consulting, I had access to company records most employees didn't. After hours, when the office was empty, I began to dig. What I discovered made the car betrayal seem trivial by comparison. My father hadn't just made a spontaneous decision about his retirement, he'd been planning it meticulously for years while deliberately keeping me in the dark. In a password-protected folder on the company server, I found a 5-year succession plan dated 3 years ago. The document outlined my father's intention to retire at 62 and included detailed notes on the redistribution of company assets and leadership positions. My name was conspicuously minimal throughout the 40-page document. More disturbing were the emails between my father and various board members discussing the asset distribution. In one exchange with board member Harold Thompson, my father wrote, "Morgan is talented in marketing, but Jessica and Tyler are committed to family values that will sustain the Matthews legacy. The transition needs to position them centrally." I felt physically sick reading these words. For years, I had believed that my professional contributions were valued. I had sacrificed vacations, relationships, and even delayed fertility treatments to meet company deadlines. Now I discovered that none of that mattered because I hadn't prioritized family values the way my father defined them. Digging deeper, I uncovered financial manipulation that shocked even my now cynical perspective. My father had been transferring company shares to Jessica secretly for the past 4 years. While I owned 15% of Matthews Financial on paper, Jessica, who had worked at the company only sporadically between maternity leaves, now owned 22%. The betrayal extended to my professional accomplishments as well. In presentation files and client reports, I found evidence that my ideas and strategies had been credited to others. The rebranding campaign I had spearheaded 2 years ago, which had won an industry award, was now documented as Tyler's innovative approach to modernizing our image. My history was being erased, my contributions minimized, all to support the narrative that Jessica and Tyler were the rightful heirs to the Matthews business empire. The third major betrayal came from an unexpected source. Michael Harris had been our family attorney and my father's close friend for decades. I had always considered him a mentor and trusted advisor. When I found his signature on the legal documents orchestrating these changes, I felt physically ill. I confronted Michael at his office the next day, hoping there was some explanation. "These transfers to Jessica, did you advise my father on these?" I asked, sliding the documents across his desk. Michael's expression was pitying rather than apologetic. "Morgan, your father asked me to handle these matters confidentially. As his attorney, I was obligated to respect that. And as someone who's known me my entire life, someone who came to my law school graduation and told me how proud you were," he sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "Your father wanted to ensure the family business stays with those committed to family values. You've chosen a different path, there's no shame in that, but it has consequences." "Different path? I've dedicated my life to this company. But not to continuing the Matthews family line," he replied, with such conviction that I knew this wasn't just my father's perspective, it was one Michael shared. "Jessica has 3 children who will carry on the name and business. Your father is thinking generationally. I left Michael's office with the devastating understanding that my value to the family had been measured in a currency I hadn't known existed: grandchildren. My business acumen, my loyalty, my years of service, none of it mattered compared to Jessica's fertility. The painful revelations continued at my mother's weekly book club. I hadn't planned to eavesdrop, but when I arrived early to drop off some paperwork for my mother, I overheard conversations from the sunroom that stopped me in my tracks. "It's such a shame about Morgan," my mother was saying to her friends. "She's always been difficult. Too focused on career instead of giving us grandchildren. Robert and I worry about her priorities." "At least you have Jessica's children," replied Susan Porter, my mother's friend of 30 years. "Some of us don't have any grandchildren to spoil." Yes, we're blessed with Jessica. She understands family comes first. Morgan still has time to come around, though at 35, her options are narrowing. I stood frozen in the hallway, hearing my worth to my own mother reduced to my reproductive status. The discussion continued, with various friends offering advice on how to guide me toward motherhood, as though my life choices were a problem to be solved rather than respected. Later that day, I broke down in my office, the weight of all these discoveries crushing me. I had built my identity around being the reliable, hard-working Matthews' daughter, only to learn that my family saw me as a disappointment, a genetic dead end unworthy of the family legacy. My colleague Alexis found me there, staring blankly at my computer with tears streaming down my face. Unlike most at the company, Alexis wasn't a family friend or longtime employee. She was someone I had hired based solely on talent. Perhaps that's why she was the only one who saw me clearly. "Morgan? What's wrong?" she asked, closing my office door behind her. "Nothing. Just family stuff." I tried to deflect, embarrassed at being caught in such a vulnerable state. Alexis sat down across from me, pushing a box of tissues my way. "This isn't just about a car, is it?" Something in her direct question broke through my defenses. For the first time, I admitted aloud the depth of the family betrayal, not just the broken promise of the Mercedes, but the systematic devaluation of my contributions and my very identity within my family. Alexis listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly outraged on my behalf. When I finally finished speaking, she leaned forward with determination in her eyes. "Morgan, I need to be very clear about something. What your family is doing isn't just hurtful, it's potentially illegal from a business perspective. You need to protect yourself before they take everything." In that moment, Alexis became my first true ally in this fight, the first person to validate that I wasn't overreacting or being materialistic. She saw the situation for what it was: a systematic betrayal by the people who should have valued me most. "You need a strategy," Alexis said the next day as we met for coffee before work. She'd insisted on a meeting outside the office where we couldn't be overheard. "This isn't just family drama anymore, this is your career, your financial future, and your reputation at stake." I learned that before joining Matthews Financial, Alexis had worked for a firm specializing in family business disputes. She'd seen similar situations play out older generations, using emotional manipulation to control assets and marginalize family members who didn't conform to expectations. "First step," she continued, "you need independent legal counsel, someone with no connection to your family or Michael Harris." By that afternoon, I was sitting in the office of Samantha Reed, a sharp-eyed attorney who specialized in business law and family asset disputes. As I laid out the situation, including the documentation I'd gathered, her expression grew increasingly serious. "They've been systematically undermining your position in the company while using your talents to build value," Samantha said, reviewing the succession documents. "And your father's attorney facilitated this, knowing you were being kept in the dark. There are several ethical and potentially legal issues here." "What can I do?" I asked, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. "More than you might think," Samantha replied, becoming my second ally in this fight. "First, we document everything. Every conversation, every email, every decision that shows your contributions versus how you've been treated. Second, we identify specific instances where promises were made in writing or with witnesses." Following Samantha's advice, I began methodically building my case. I searched through years of birthday cards and found what I was looking for: my 16th birthday card where my father had written, "To my brilliant daughter someday the Mercedes will be yours. Love, Dad." It wasn't a legal document, but it was evidence of a long-standing promise. I recorded conversations with family members when legally permissible, documenting their dismissive attitudes and contradictory statements. I compiled financial records showing how my marketing strategies had directly increased company profits. I collected emails where my ideas were praised before being attributed to others in official documentation. My first strategic move was subtle but significant. I filed a formal complaint using the company whistleblower policy, a policy I had actually helped implement 3 years earlier. The complaint detailed potentially improper financial transfers and governance issues, carefully worded to focus on business practices rather than family dynamics. The response was swift and vicious. My father called an emergency family meeting explicitly excluding me, but I learned about it from a sympathetic administrative assistant. Jessica, Tyler, my parents, and even cousin Patrick, who worked in accounting, gathered to discuss the Morgan situation. My father reportedly raged about my betrayal and threatened to remove me from the company entirely. That evening, Tyler showed up at my house unannounced. Brian had moved out temporarily the week before, so I was alone when I opened the door to find my brother-in-law standing there with an expression of practiced concern. "Morgan, we need to talk about what you're doing," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "This whistleblower complaint, you're putting the entire family at risk." "I'm documenting improper business practices," I replied calmly. "As an executive of Matthews Financial, I have a fiduciary duty to report potential misconduct." Tyler's facade of concern dropped instantly. "Cut the legal bullshit, Morgan. You're being vindictive because you didn't get a car. Grow up." This stopped being about the car when I discovered Dad has been transferring shares to Jessica behind my back for years. Or when I found out you're taking credit for my marketing strategies. His expression darkened. "You'll regret making this a legal battle. Think about the family name. Think about your parents' reputation in the community." "I have thought about it," I answered, opening the door to indicate our conversation was over. "Maybe you should think about what happens when the board reviews the true authorship of the strategies you've been taking credit for." As Tyler left, I realized there was no turning back. My family had drawn their battle lines, and now I had drawn mine. The quiet, accommodating Morgan who put family peace above personal respect was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone willing to fight for what she deserved. The following weeks saw an orchestrated campaign to undermine my professional standing within Matthews Financial. Key accounts were reassigned without explanation. Client meetings I had scheduled were canceled last minute or relocated without notifying me. Proposals I submitted mysteriously vanished from the server before board review meetings. I documented each incident meticulously. Then came the discovery that turned suspicion into confirmation. My father had been calling my biggest clients personally, suggesting they work with Tyler instead of me. "Robert mentioned some changes coming in the leadership structure," said Richard Townsend, a client I'd worked with for 5 years, when I called to ask why he'd canceled our quarterly strategy meeting. He thought it might be easier to transition to Tyler now rather than later. "Is everything okay, Morgan?" "Just some internal restructuring," I replied professionally, while internally seething. My father was actively sabotaging my client relationships I'd built through years of dedicated service. The fourth major betrayal came from an unexpected source, my assistant, Kimberly. I had hired her 2 years ago and mentored her personally, even advocating for her promotion when budget constraints made it difficult. I considered her not just an employee but a friend. When documents from my private drive began appearing in my father's presentations, I knew there had to be an internal leak. I hated becoming suspicious of my colleagues, but Samantha had advised me to protect my information carefully. I created several dummy documents with slightly different phrasings and waited to see which version would make its way to my father. The trap worked. 3 days later, my father referenced information from a document that only Kimberly had access to. With Alexis as a witness, I confronted Kimberly in a conference room after hours. "How long have you been sharing my files with my father?" I asked, placing the evidence before her. Kimberly's face crumpled, tears immediately springing to her eyes. "Morgan, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to. But your father approached me directly. He said it was for succession planning purposes. And you believe that? After working directly with me for 2 years? He said I'd be promoted if I kept him informed about your projects and meetings, she admitted, unable to meet my eyes. He said you were planning to leave the company and he needed to protect client relationships. The betrayal stung, but I found I couldn't entirely blame Kimberly. My father had exploited his position of power, manipulating a junior employee with promises of advancement. It was a pattern I was becoming all too familiar with. The culmination of these professional attacks came at the quarterly board meeting. Without warning, my father added an agenda item: leadership restructuring. As the presentation slides appeared on screen, I saw with shock that the proposal was to remove me as Chief Marketing Officer effective immediately, with Tyler assuming all my responsibilities. Morgan has done excellent work, my father said smoothly. But as we look toward the future of Matthews Financial, we need leadership committed to long-term family values and stability. The coded language was clear to me now. Family values meant producing grandchildren, and stability meant accepting the patriarchal authority without question. I had prepared for this moment, however, and I wasn't going down without a fight. Before we vote on this proposal, I said calmly, I'd like to distribute some relevant information. I handed each board member a folder containing documentation of my contributions to the company over the past decade, client testimonials, financial growth directly attributable to my strategies, industry recognition we'd received under my leadership, and most damning evidence that several of the strategies attributed to Tyler had been my work. I'm deeply committed to Matthews Financial, I continued. So committed that I believe leadership positions should be earned through merit and results, not family politics. I'm happy to let my record speak for itself. The external board members, those not related to the Matthews family, exchanged uncomfortable glances. Harold Thompson, the most senior independent director, cleared his throat. I think we need more time to review this information before making any leadership changes, he said carefully. Robert, I suggest we table this discussion until the next meeting. It was a temporary reprieve, not a victory, but it bought me time. My father's furious expression as the meeting adjourned told me the battle was far from over. The professional attacks were mirrored by personal ones. Family friends began calling to ask if everything was okay with me. Having heard concerning reports about my mental state, Jessica drove the Mercedes, now hers, past my house daily, parking it conspicuously when visiting neighbors on my street. My mother called mutual friends, expressing worry about my obsession with material possessions. The most painful blow came when Brian called to inform me he was staying with Jessica and Tyler temporarily to give me space to calm down. My own husband had not only abandoned me in this fight but had literally moved in with the opposition. Jessica and Tyler have a guest room, and they could use an extra hand with the kids, he explained, as though he were doing something noble rather than betraying me further. I think some distance would be good for us right now. You're not thinking clearly, and you think staying with my sister who's actively working against me is going to improve our marriage? I asked incredulously. This feud is tearing the family apart, Morgan. Someone needs to be the bigger person. But that someone is always expected to be me, isn't it? I'm supposed to accept being lied to, having promises broken, watching my career undermined, all while smiling and playing the good daughter. See, this is exactly what I mean. You're being dramatic and vindictive, Brian sighed. Call me when you're ready to behave like an adult. After hanging up, I sat in my empty house feeling utterly defeated. The stress was taking a physical toll. I'd lost weight, developed insomnia, and was experiencing stress-induced migraines for the first time in my life. For a brief, dark moment, I considered giving up accepting the car loss, the professional demotion, the family's narrative of me as selfish and materialistic. It would certainly be easier than continuing this exhausting fight alone. That night, I called my college friend Rachel, someone completely removed from my family dynamics, and poured out everything that had happened. Her perspective proved invaluable. Morgan, this isn't the you I know, she said firmly. The Morgan Matthews I met in college never let bullies win, and that's what your family is being right now. They're bullying you because they've always been able to control you through your desire for their approval. But I'm so tired, Rachel. and they're all united against me. Then you find a different kind of strength. Stop playing by their rules. They designed those rules to make you lose. Start playing by your own. That conversation became a turning point. I realized I had been fighting to make my family respect me, to make them keep their promises. But perhaps the real fight was about respecting myself enough to stand up to their manipulation, whether they ever acknowledged it or not. Rachel's advice to stop playing by my family's rules echoed in my mind as I drove to the office late one evening. The building was nearly empty, exactly as I wanted it. With most employees gone, I could conduct my research without watchful eyes reporting back to my father. I had been analyzing company finances for weeks, looking for leverage, but had focused mainly on my own contributions and mistreatment. Tonight, I would look deeper into the business practices themselves. For hours, I combed through financial records, tax filings, and transaction histories. As the night wore on, disturbing patterns emerged. Matthews Financial had been engaged in aggressive tax avoidance strategies that walked a dangerous line between legal optimization and potential fraud. My father had implemented these schemes gradually over the past 8 years, notably beginning right after I completed my MBA and joined the company full-time. Had he deliberately waited until I was professionally implicated before initiating these risky strategies? The timing suggested a disturbing possibility. Not only was I being pushed out now, but I had potentially been set up as a future scapegoat if these tax issues ever came to light. The most damning evidence was a series of offshore transactions that had no clear business purpose except to hide assets from tax authorities. As Chief Marketing Officer, I had no direct oversight of financial operations, but my signature appeared on several related documents where I had trusted my father's explanation of their purpose. While processing this devastating information, my phone buzzed with a company-wide email. Despite the late hour, it announced exciting leadership changes effective immediately. My cousin Patrick Davies, my mother's nephew with a mediocre business degree and no significant industry experience, was being promoted to Executive Vice President of Client Relations, a newly created position that would oversee much of my department. The fifth betrayal was now complete. Not only was I being sidelined, but a less qualified family member was being positioned above me. Moments later, my phone rang, Patrick calling, undoubtedly to gloat. "Morgan! Did you see the news? Uncle Robert just told me. Isn't it exciting?" His voice oozed with smug satisfaction. "Congratulations, Patrick," I replied flatly. "I didn't realize you had qualifications in marketing or client relations." "Oh, I've been working closely with Uncle Robert. He says I have a natural talent for relationship building. Nothing personal, just business, right?" "Nothing personal," I echoed, my mind racing with the implications of what I had discovered earlier. "Patrick, just out of curiosity, how familiar are you with the company's tax strategies?" "Tax stuff? That's boring back-end work. I focus on the client-facing side," he laughed dismissively. "Anyway, I just wanted to reach out. Make sure there are no hard feelings." After ending the call, I sat in my darkened office with the evidence of financial impropriety on my screen and made the hardest decision of my professional life. The next morning, I made an appointment with the IRS whistleblower office. The decision wasn't made lightly. Reporting my own family's business for potential tax violations would likely destroy Matthews Financial, the company my grandfather had founded, that my father had built, that I had helped grow. It would damage not just my father but potentially innocent employees who knew nothing of these practices. "Sometimes the right thing feels wrong," Samantha advised when I called her about my discovery. But ask yourself this: if these practices came to light years from now, after Jessica and Tyler have fully taken over, who do you think your father would allow to take the fall? The children he's protecting, or the daughter he's already pushing out? I knew the answer. My father had already shown he was willing to sacrifice my career to position Jessica and Tyler favorably. If legal troubles emerged later, I had little doubt I would be framed as the responsible party. As I prepared my documentation for the IRS meeting, I simultaneously executed my professional contingency plan. I had been quietly setting up an independent business consultancy, reaching out to industry contacts without directly soliciting Matthews Financial clients. I secured a small business loan using my condo as collateral and rented modest office space across town. Most importantly, I began documenting my client interactions with extraordinary detail, recording, with permission, client calls, saving every email, and creating comprehensive records of my strategies and recommendations. If Matthews Financial tried to claim ownership of my client relationships, I would be prepared. The meeting with the IRS whistleblower office was surreal. I provided extensive documentation of questionable tax practices, carefully focused on the transactions rather than my personal family drama. The IRS representatives were professional and non-judgmental, explaining the process for investigating such claims and the protections available to whistleblowers. This information will be treated confidentially, the senior investigator assured me. But you should be aware that if an investigation proceeds, your identity as the initial informant may eventually become known. I understand, I replied, feeling the weight of my decision. I'm prepared for that possibility. 2 weeks later, the first tangible result of my actions appeared. Matthews Financial received formal notice of an upcoming IRS audit. The news spread through the company like wildfire, creating precisely the distraction I needed to strengthen my independent position without scrutiny. My father called me into his office the same day, his face ashen with stress. "Did you know about this audit?" he demanded. "I saw the notification like everyone else," I answered calmly, watching his expression carefully. "This is serious, Morgan. They're looking at transactions going back 8 years. "That sounds concerning," I replied neutrally. "I'm sure the company's financial practices will stand up to scrutiny." His eyes narrowed, studying me. "You know something, don't you?" "I know that focusing on my marketing responsibilities is the best way I can help the company during this challenging time," I said, rising to leave. "Was there anything specific you needed from my department to assist with the audit?" As I walked out, I could feel his suspicion following me. He didn't have proof of my involvement, but he knew me well enough to sense my newfound confidence. For the first time since the car announcement, I had regained some control, and we both knew it. The IRS audit of Matthews Financial quickly expanded beyond a routine examination. Within weeks, news of the investigation leaked to local business publications. "Regional financial firm faces federal scrutiny," read the headline in the business section of the city paper. The article was carefully worded to avoid direct accusations, but it mentioned questionable offshore transactions and potential regulatory concerns enough to damage the company's sterling reputation in the community. The effects were immediate. Several major clients put their accounts on hold pending the outcome of the investigation. The company's credit rating was downgraded. Board members began demanding emergency meetings and detailed explanations. As the professional consequences mounted, my family began to implode from within. At a hastily called family dinner, which I attended only to witness the fallout, the unified front they had presented against me fractured spectacularly. "How could you let this happen?" my mother demanded of my father, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "Everything we've built is at risk." "Don't blame me," my father shot back. "I've managed this company successfully for 30 years. This is a witch hunt. The IRS doesn't conduct witch hunts." "Dad," Jessica interjected, her tone surprisingly critical. "They follow evidence." "What have you been doing?" "Nothing that other companies don't do," he defended himself. "Tax optimization is standard practice." "Optimization is one thing," Tyler said, looking nervous. "But some of these transactions I've been hearing about, I never signed off on those." "You signed whatever I put in front of you," my father snapped at him, revealing the truth about Tyler's actual level of involvement in company decisions. I sat quietly, watching years of family dynamics unravel in real time. The unified family that had judged me, dismissed my concerns, and broken promises was disintegrating under pressure. Without an external target for their blame, they were turning on each other. "Morgan," my mother turned to me suddenly. "You understand the company better than anyone except your father. What do you think is happening?" The irony of being asked for my expertise now wasn't lost on me. "I think the company faces serious challenges," I replied carefully, "both from the investigation itself and from the market's reaction to it." "That's all you have to say?" Jessica demanded. "This affects all of us." "Yes," I agreed, meeting her eyes steadily. "It does affect all of us." Just like Dad's decisions about the company and family assets affected all of us. The difference is, I wasn't consulted then. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table as my point registered. For perhaps the first time, they were experiencing what I had felt for months. Powerlessness in the face of decisions made without their input or consent. The sixth betrayal came days later when Brian's lawyer contacted me. Not only was my husband proceeding with divorce, but he was demanding a portion of my company's shares and future earnings from my new consulting business, claiming he had supported my career development. Your husband has been quite forthcoming about your mental state and vindictive behavior towards your family, his attorney informed me during our initial call. We believe this contextualizes the separation in a way that will be significant for asset division. Through strategic questioning, I learned that Brian had been speaking with my family's lawyers for weeks before moving out. His decision to leave hadn't been spontaneous but calculated, likely advised by the same legal team that had orchestrated my professional marginalization. I'd like to meet with Brian directly, I requested, knowing his lawyer would advise against it but hoping Brian's guilt might override that advice. Surprisingly, Brian agreed to meet at a neutral coffee shop. When he arrived, the man I had loved for 7 years looked like a stranger, defensive, yet with an underlying nervousness that suggested he knew he had crossed a line. I didn't want things to get this legal, he began awkwardly, but your actions left me no choice. My actions? I repeated incredulously. You moved in with my sister while she was actively working against me. I was trying to be a peacemaker, he claimed. But then you reported the company to the IRS. Do you have any idea what you've done to the family? So they knew, or at least strongly suspected, my role in the investigation. What I've done is refuse to be the scapegoat for my father's financial decisions. Your father gave you everything, Brian said, his voice rising slightly. A career, status in the community, financial security. No, I interrupted firmly. I earned those things through hard work and sacrifice. Work and sacrifice that none of you acknowledged or valued. You're choosing your pride over your family. I'm cutting my losses, he stated coldly. My lawyer advises me that as your spouse during your most productive professional years, I'm entitled to a significant settlement. Your lawyer should also advise you about the legal implications of conspiring with my family against me, I replied, sliding a folder across the table. Texts, emails, recorded conversations all documenting your coordination with my father and sister, while still my legal spouse. I wonder how a family court would view that. Brian's face paled as he flipped through the evidence I had compiled. You've been spying on me? No, I've been protecting myself from people I thought loved me. There's a difference. I left Brian at that coffee shop with a clear choice. Pursue a reasonable, quiet divorce settlement, or face the consequences of his betrayal being made public through court proceedings. His lawyer contacted Samantha the next day to discuss amicable terms. The most unexpected moment in this family implosion came when Jessica appeared at my door one evening, without her children or husband. She looked exhausted. The polished supermom facade cracked to reveal someone frightened and overwhelmed. Can I come in? She asked, her voice lacking its usual confident edge. I hesitated but stepped aside to let her enter. We had barely spoken since the audit became public. Dad's a mess, she said without preamble, sinking onto my couch. The board is talking about forcing him into early retirement. Some are suggesting he step down immediately while the investigation proceeds. That would be a prudent business decision, I replied, maintaining emotional distance. Morgan, Jessica looked up at me, tears forming. You've always been the smart one. Dad needs your help. The company needs your help. Now you acknowledge that? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. After months of undermining me, taking credit for my work, and literally taking what was promised to me, it was wrong, she admitted, surprising me. The car, the promotion for Tyler, all of it. I let Dad convince me I deserved those things because of the kids. But I knew it wasn't right, she whispered. I knew how hard you worked. I was jealous of your success, your independence. It was easier to tell myself you didn't need those things than to admit I was taking what wasn't mine. Her admission should have felt vindicating, But instead, it just felt sad that it had taken a crisis of this magnitude for my sister to recognize her actions. Still, I wasn't ready to offer absolution. I can't fix this for Dad, Jessica. Whatever financial decisions he made, they were his choices. But you could help minimize the damage, she pressed. The board respects you. The clients trust you. They should have thought of that before systematically pushing me out of the company, I replied. Actions have consequences, isn't that what Dad always taught us? Jessica left without the assistance she sought. But 3 days later, the Mercedes appeared in my driveway with a note on the windshield. It's not worth what it's doing to us. J. The luxury SUV that had sparked this entire conflict now sat in my possession, but the victory felt hollow. Looking at the vehicle, I no longer saw the symbol of my father's love and recognition I had once coveted. Instead, I saw a material object that had somehow become more important to my family than honesty, respect, and genuine love. 3 months after the IRS audit began, Matthews Financial Consulting faced a critical juncture. The preliminary findings had identified several problematic transactions, though not the comprehensive fraud some had feared. The company would face penalties and increased scrutiny, but survival was possible with immediate corrective action. The board called an emergency meeting to determine next steps. My father, his authority severely diminished, sat ashen-faced as external directors took control of the agenda. Harold Thompson, leading the meeting, outlined the situation bluntly. We have 2 paths forward, he explained. Complete cooperation with authorities, immediate remediation of identified issues, and a significant restructuring of leadership and practices. Or we can fight the findings, which our legal counsel advises would likely lead to expanded investigations and potential criminal charges. The choice was obvious to everyone in the room. When discussion turned to restructuring, all eyes eventually found their way to me. Morgan, Harold said directly, you're the only senior executive not implicated in the problematic transactions. You also have the client relationships and institutional knowledge to stabilize operations. The board would like you to present a restructuring plan. I had anticipated this moment and came prepared. For the next hour, I outlined a comprehensive reorganization, new financial controls, leadership changes, transparency measures, and client retention strategies. I proposed bringing in an external CEO temporarily while maintaining key client relationships myself. There's one condition, I added, as I concluded my presentation. My reinstatement as Chief Marketing Officer with expanded authority over client communications during this transition. The company needs a consistent, trusted voice right now. The board approved my plan with minimal amendments. My father, though still technically chairman, had been effectively sidelined. Tyler, whose signature appeared on several questionable documents, was moved to a non-executive role pending further investigation. The power dynamics that had defined Matthews Financial for decades had been completely reversed. As I left the boardroom, my father caught up to me in the hallway. You won, Morgan, he said, his voice a mixture of resignation and grudging respect. Is this what you wanted all along, to take over? No, Dad, I replied honestly. I wanted recognition for my contributions and for you to keep your promises. This isn't a victory I ever sought. He nodded slowly, seeming to truly see me for the first time in months. You outplayed me. I didn't think you had it in you. It wasn't an apology, but from my father, it was as close as I might ever get to acknowledgement. The professional power shift was mirrored by personal recalibrations. My mother reached out repeatedly, inviting me to lunch with increasing urgency until I finally accepted. We met at an upscale restaurant where she'd insisted on paying a first in our relationship. Morgan, we're still family, she began, her carefully applied makeup not quite concealing the stress lines that had deepened around her eyes. Your father made mistakes, but we need to move forward together. Moving forward requires honesty, Mom, I replied, and respect, something I haven't felt from this family in a long time. I've always respected you, she protested weakly. No, you've tolerated my choices while waiting for me to become someone else, someone more like Jessica. I heard you at your book club, talking about my difficult personality and childlessness. My mother had the grace to look ashamed. It was wrong to speak about you that way. I was trying to fit in with my friends who all have grandchildren. It was thoughtless. It was revealing, I corrected. It showed me how you really see me. People can change how they see things, Morgan. This situation has forced me to reconsider many assumptions. We didn't achieve full reconciliation during that lunch, but we established a new framework. I would maintain contact, but with clear boundaries. Respect was earned, not given because of blood relation. My mother seemed to accept these terms, perhaps recognizing it was the most I could offer right now. Jessica's attempt at reconciliation came through action rather than words. After returning the Mercedes, she began making small gestures, forwarding articles relevant to my work, occasionally asking business advice rather than running to our father, acknowledging my expertise in family discussions. I maintained polite distance, not yet ready to fully trust, but recognized her efforts represented a significant shift from her previous entitlement. The most satisfying confrontation came during divorce proceedings with Brian. His lawyer had continued pushing for a share of my company holdings despite the evidence of his collusion with my family. At a mediation session, Brian attempted to paint himself as a supportive spouse who had contributed to my career success. Throughout our marriage, I provided the stable home environment that allowed Morgan to focus on her professional advancement, Brian claimed. Reading from a prepared statement, my attorney, Samantha, responded by producing a comprehensive timeline. Brian's secret meetings with my father, text messages coordinating with Jessica, and evidence he had shared confidential information about our fertility treatments without my consent. Moreover, Samantha continued, we have documentation that Mr. Davis actively undermined Mrs. Matthews' professional standing while legally obligated to act in her best interest as her spouse. We're prepared to detail these actions in court if necessary. Brian's lawyer, after reviewing the evidence, requested a break. When we reconvened, their demands had been dramatically reduced. The settlement we eventually reached was far more equitable than their initial position, with Brian relinquishing all claims to my business assets in exchange for a one-time payment significantly below what he had sought. The professional landscape continued to evolve favorably. Clients who had paused their relationships with Matthews Financial began returning after seeing the changes implemented. Industry publications that had reported on the scandal now wrote about the company's transparent response and ethical transformation. Former assistant Kimberly, who had been let go during the restructuring, reached out to apologize and ask for a recommendation. After consideration, I agreed to meet with her. I understand you were put in an impossible position, I told her over coffee. My father used his authority to pressure you. I should have been loyal to you, she replied, genuine regret in her voice. You were always fair to me. I'll understand if you can't forgive me. Forgiveness comes with time, I answered. But I can write you a recommendation focusing on your skills and work ethic. Everyone deserves a second chance to prove themselves. In that moment, I realized I was becoming someone new, someone who could acknowledge others' failures without being defined by them, who could set boundaries without burning bridges entirely. The crucible of betrayal had transformed me, burning away some naivety but tempering rather than hardening my core values. 1 year after my father's retirement announcement that had triggered this family earthquake, I stood in my new office reviewing quarterly reports. Matthews Financial Consulting had been renamed Summit Advisors Group, a symbolic break from the past while maintaining the core business that served our clients well. The external CEO had stabilized operations, implemented proper financial controls, and settled with regulatory authorities. The penalties had been substantial but not fatal. With the immediate crisis behind us, the board had voted to transition leadership back to internal executives, with me assuming the role of Chief Strategy Officer, a position created to leverage my client relationships and industry knowledge. My father had officially retired, though he maintained a board seat and consulting role appropriate to his experience. Our relationship remained complex, professional respect had been reestablished, but the personal wounds were still healing. We spoke regularly about business matters and occasionally about neutral topics like sports or current events. But the easy familiarity of our earlier relationship remained elusive. The luxury SUV that had symbolized so much conflict had been sold months earlier. I donated the proceeds to a local women's business development center that offered mentoring and microloans to female entrepreneurs. The symbolism wasn't lost on my family. The disputed inheritance had been transformed into future opportunities for women building their own legacies, rather than fighting for recognition within existing structures. The healing process with my family progressed unevenly. My father's minor heart scare 4 months earlier had prompted a moment of genuine connection when I visited him in the hospital. As we sat together while my mother got coffee, he had looked at me with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "You know, you're more like me than I wanted to admit," he said quietly. "The determination, the strategic thinking, you got that from me." "I know, Dad," I replied, recognizing that this was his version of a compliment. "I was wrong about the car," he continued, surprising me with this direct acknowledgement. "And other things too. Why did you promise it to me if you didn't intend to keep that promise?" He considered the question carefully. "I meant it at the time. Then circumstances changed, Jessica had the kids, and I convinced myself that justified changing the arrangement. I didn't think it would matter so much to you. It wasn't just about the car," I explained. "It was about feeling valued for my contributions, about having my word respected." He nodded slowly. "I see that now. Too late? Maybe. But I see it." It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a start, his first acknowledgement that my perspective had validity. The grudging respect he had shown after I outmaneuvered him professionally had gradually evolved into something more genuine as he watched me help save the company he had spent his life building. My relationship with my mother improved more steadily. Once freed from automatically supporting my father's decisions, she revealed more of her own personality and perspectives. We established a weekly lunch tradition, carefully avoiding sensitive topics at first but gradually building toward more authentic conversations. "I was jealous sometimes," she admitted during one such lunch, "of your independence, your confidence in your career. Women of my generation were expected to find fulfillment solely through family." "You never told me that before," I said, surprised by this revelation. "It was easier to push you toward traditional choices than to acknowledge my own limitations," she replied with newfound self-awareness. "I'm proud of you, Morgan. I should have said that more often." Jessica and I maintained a cordial relationship, gradually rebuilding trust through small, consistent actions rather than grand gestures. She had stepped back from her sense of entitlement, and I had softened my resentment. We would never be the inseparable sisters of childhood, but we had established a new equilibrium based on mutual respect rather than competition. Perhaps the most significant healing occurred in my relationship with myself. The family betrayal had forced me to examine my own values and priorities. Through therapy and self-reflection, I recognized unhealthy patterns I needed to break, particularly my tendency to seek validation through achievement and family approval. "The car was never really about the car," I told my therapist during a breakthrough session. "It was about feeling seen and valued by my father. I defined my worth through his recognition." "And now?" she prompted. "Now I'm learning to define my worth internally," I replied, "to validate myself rather than seeking it from people who may never be able to give it consistently." This internal shift manifested in my expanded personal connections. Alexis, my first ally during the conflict, had become a close friend. Samantha and I maintained a relationship that blended professional respect with personal warmth. I had rebuilt connections with college friends like Rachel, who had no stake in family dynamics but offered genuine support. These relationships, chosen rather than inherited, formed the foundation of a new kind of family, one built on mutual respect, shared values, and consistent support rather than obligation and expectation. For the first holiday season after the conflict, I hosted a celebration at my home rather than attending the traditional family gathering. The guest list included friends, colleagues, and yes, family members, but on my terms, in my space, with new traditions that reflected my values rather than simply perpetuating patterns from the past. My mother attended without my father, who wasn't yet ready for that level of social interaction with me. Jessica came for dessert with her children, but without Tyler, whose relationship with me remained strained. These arrangements weren't ideal, but they represented progress, family members respecting boundaries rather than demanding conformity. As the evening wound down and guests departed, I found myself alone in my kitchen, contentedly washing dishes and reflecting on the journey of the past year. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Hope your evening went well. Talk tomorrow. Brief, not particularly emotional, but an effort at connection he wouldn't have made a year earlier. The next morning, I drove to a meeting in my new vehicle, a practical, fuel-efficient model I had selected for its comfort and reliability rather than status or appearance. As I navigated the familiar streets of the city I'd grown up in, I reflected on the profound lessons of the past year. I had learned that respect isn't inherited or given freely because of family connections. It's earned through standing up for your value, even when it means standing alone against those who should support you most. I had discovered that sometimes you have to lose what you thought you wanted to discover what you truly need. Most importantly, I had learned that true strength isn't about winning battles or accumulating power, it's about maintaining your integrity even when others abandon theirs, about offering forgiveness without forgetting the lessons of past betrayals, and about rebuilding on a foundation of truth rather than comfortable illusions. The luxury SUV was long gone, but the woman who emerged from fighting for it was stronger, wiser, and more authentically herself than she had ever been before. Have you ever stood up to your family when they treated you unfairly? What was the most valuable thing you learned from that experience? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Your support helps me continue bringing these real-life stories to light. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is determined by you, not by others' opinions or judgments. Until next time, stay strong and true to yourself.